All right, welcome back. This is The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and today we are talking about the newly released Netflix series, Three Body Problem. But before we get into all that, we had a little bit of some apocalyptic rumblings here in New York City.
Yes, we certainly did.
If you're on social media, I'm sure you heard nothing about this. But how many earthquakes have you lived through?
I was told I've lived through more. Apparently there was another one in New York, but I have no memory
You don't
of
have
it
a memory of
at
that?
all. This was my first one that I at least
You were
felt while it was happening. Although, well, what happened did you feel it?
Oh yeah, majorly.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your story?
I was in my room, this very room that I'm in right now, and the funny thing is, I was sitting in the exact same spot that I was sitting in when the last earthquake happened in 2011. That's right. I've had the same.
You've come a long way,
Yeah,
Stu.
I've had the same apartment for 14 years, and which is, knock on wood that it stays that way. But
Sure.
I was sitting on my couch and I noticed the bookshelf start to sway, and I was sitting with a cat, who's here with me right now, sitting right in front of the microphone, very annoyingly, and I noticed him kind of fidgeting and freaking out, and I said, "Hey, what's wrong?" And I looked over, and the shelves that you see behind me, if you're looking at this on video, the shelves started to sway. People who look at our clips on Instagram sometimes are like, "Stu, isn't that just like a huge stack of books behind you?" No, there's actually shelves. It's not just a stack. But this is not
Really?
not great content.
I've been in there and I didn't even know that.
Yeah, there's like a whole metal. There's three metal
Okay,
things here.
right.
Yeah. In any case, in 2011, it was like much less serious. This time, not only did I see the shelves swaying, but I heard the earth rumbling. And it's
Great word. It's a great word.
earthquake, wonderful, right? It's perfect. So
They
evocative.
nailed it.
And I
Yeah.
honestly was like, is this a terrorist attack? Is there like
No,
I
Stu.
live kind of near the subway, so I was like, is the subway train underneath my apartment like exploding? Because it sounded like something was blowing up underground.
Okay.
Which is,
Okay.
kind of what is in fact happening, right?
Sure.
So yeah, it was pretty exciting. And then, nothing but updates about this for the rest of the day on social media. Was that an earthquake? How many people tweet like, was that an earthquake? It's like,
Yeah. Well, yeah. For on my end, I was working, sitting here,
yep.
and my apartment is. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that this place could collapse. I don't have faith in the structural integrity of the building I live in,
So you
right?
think
And
the apartment could collapse in a earthquake?
well, it's so I have people who live upstairs,
Uh-huh.
and there's a furniture store downstairs. And so when it happened, I definitely noticed that something happened, but my first thought was that the people upstairs were like moving something and
Yeah.
it like went really wrong. And I had that thought while it was still happening, and then it went a little too long. And just was kind of like, well, that just when I was about to be like, what the fuck, it stopped. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Well, at least like they can, hurl a couch across the room and the
And
entire
and the
apartment
building
won't.
stands.
Yeah, so then I like just I didn't react at all. And then on my desktop I have the WhatsApp, which is how I communicate with my brother back in Canada.
Hmm.
And I got a message from my brother that said, were you just in an earthquake? And I wrote back, oh, so that's what that was, with no, absolutely no idea. And what was hilarious about this is not the first time that this has happened to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember, but during the not, I guess, the pandemic lockdown-ish vibes, there was that huge rainstorm, and there was like some serious flooding in limited pockets of the city. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And there, you saw the clips of like
Yeah, I think
subway
you actually like
station.
went down to you like sent me a photo. You're like,
Yeah,
do you
so
think like do you
this is
think
what
I'm
happened.
gonna
This is what
flood out
happened.
here?
I am there with Maggie, with my girlfriend, and we are watching our like 30th season of Survivor, which we went through the entire catalog
Wow.
during the lockdown phase. So we are just locked in on, the 650th episode of Jeff Probst explaining the same rules of the same games to different people. And I get this text from my brother, this WhatsApp that says, "Are you safe?" And I'm like, "What?" And because, as you're pointing out with the social media thing, any weather event in New York becomes
Ugh.
like your entire
And
timeline.
all my
Oh,
friends in other places do nothing but hate on it.
of
Like,
course, I mean, and well, they should. It becomes like a local weather network for New
yeah, no,
Yorkers,
I
like Twitter. It's a fucking insane. And so I'm like, what? And he's like, look out your window. He's like instructing me, like, look.
from Toronto or
So
whatever.
the funniest thing about it is that I open my window and we are actually in one of the worst spots of
Yeah,
the whole storm.
it was like the
I
epicenter
see
of the flood.
I'm in a fucking apocalypse movie.
Yeah,
Things are floating down the street. There's like a dude across the street who's stuck like underneath the awning of like the pizza
a
place.
bodega or whatever. Yeah.
It is up to the car windows. And so his text was like, "Are you safe?" And I just text back, "I'm not sure." Right? So then I call him on FaceTime. And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yo, this is fucking crazy. I should go down and like check the front like doorway, right? Because we live on the second floor."
Yeah, just make sure. This is what you
And
sent to
so
me. Yeah, I remember
yeah,
this.
so I'm like holding the phone, showing my brother, kind of being like, "Yeah, it's flooded. It's pretty crazy." And as I turn around the staircase to see the door, there's this fucking huge bang and a huge, like the door just opens and all this water comes fucking hurling into the apartment. And me and Maggie are like, "Ah!" And we're so like, right? Like, and then, from then it wasn't so bad,
Yeah,
Thor
it
managed,
abated pretty quickly.
it abated pretty
I
quickly,
think this
but
was
it
the
was
night
like,
before my first day at my new job in the Bronx, also teaching. And I'm teaching a class, as I've mentioned before, about environmental literature and like, the rise in global warming and catastrophic
yeah.
weather. And like literally the first day of the class, I had to be like, all classes were canceled because there was tons of flooding in the Bronx also. So I had to be like, our environmental literature class will meet virtually today because of an environmental disaster. It's like,
Well, it is like it's just you have these moments, these like touchstones of this like brief flirtation with serious disaster,
yeah,
right? And no disrespect to people who cope with it in reality, like a true disaster,
sure.
but it's very hard not to deny that there's this natural impulse of a sort of excitement,
Yeah.
right? Like whether you're kind of excited that there might be aftershocks or when the power goes out, and it might never, when will it come back on? And then like, I remember when I was a kid, the power would go out, and that was back when you still like, spoke to neighbors and I have this like childhood memory of the power going out always being this very communal, like fun moment, right?
Sure, sure.
People would come to the yard and we'd have candles and people would hang out. And I remember one time we were a little older and we like went down like back in our like late teens, very early 20s, like hippie phase, went to the downtown and everything was shut down and dark and we were like playing guitars. I mean, it was incredibly obnoxious, but it was like sweet, And it's the same thing with the earthquake and the flooding, where there is this moment where you're like, oh, maybe I don't have to worry about anything anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
It reminds
like
me of that moment
maybe
in
there's
the
gonna be a perspective shift right now And then the water starts to recede, and you're like, all right, well,
Back to work.
back to
Yeah.
episode 12, season 39 of Survivor, you know?
Yeah, I think of that moment in The Sopranos. I think it's towards the end of the first or maybe second season where they get caught in the storm and they all congregate in the Artie's restaurant without the
Yeah,
power.
yeah, yeah.
And that's when Tony gives his famous, these are the good moments. You got to remember
Right.
them, right? Like
Right.
it's that kind of vibe, right? I mean, I talk about my
It's
students.
always fun to consider that you were like kind of having those good moments before the real one hits, you know? Like,
Before the big one.
there's probably gonna still be that little moment of time where you're like, oh, interesting.
Hey,
And then like,
we're
whoa,
all
this isn't
together.
going away. This was pretty serious, isn't it? Oh no, I should have bought a broadsword. You know, like,
Well, I always ask, I do a lot of works that deal with flooding in my classes, and I'm always asking students. When I was a kid, I used to love the idea of being caught in a flood. Like, I thought it would just be so cool to be like floating down the street on like a raft. And
oh, you
like,
pictured yourself handling it well.
oh, like Tom Sawyer or something,
Sure.
just
Yeah, yeah.
like
It's like
I saw
it
it as
becomes
like
like a theme park,
like
your
an
whole
adventure,
life. Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm like, as an adult, I'm like, oh man, that water, like imagine how utterly disgusting and filthy that water would be, just filled with
Right.
like
How small of a rainfall has to be happening for you to like totally change your plans?
oh
You know,
yeah,
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 I'm not going out in this.
yeah. But disasters are. I think there is something about that. It does give you that sort of break from whatever your present
Right,
reality
right.
is.
I will say at the risk of complete ignorance, maybe you know something about this, but
Sure.
it's like a 4.8 on the Richter scale, and you felt it.
That
You
it's
felt the earthquake.
it's not that high, but
It's not that high, but the
it's
question,
pretty
so
high
my
for
question,
New York.
my question with earthquakes, and this goes for like most of them,
Yeah.
and certainly that one, is that like, so why doesn't more stuff get damaged? Like, it's just not strong enough to like really actually break shit and like
Yeah, I mean, I
cause
think
buildings to collapse.
building codes are, you're supposed to build up I mean, to a certain level, like in
A certain level
anticipation.
on the Richter.
Yeah, yeah, because remember, the Richter scale is like a logarithmic scale. So like a 7 point.
Remember, like, oh yeah, that was in my memory. Okay.
Well, I mean, so like an 8.0 on the Richter scale is not like twice a 4.0. It's like many, many, many
Okay,
times. So
sure.
it's like, so when you hear about like a 7.8 shakes
Seems like a
California,
pretty stupid scale from what you're
well,
explaining.
it's, I mean,
Why did he choose to limit himself to such small numbers? I mean, just
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's a geologist or mathematician could explain to us why this is actually a better way of
right,
doing
right.
it.
We'll have
But
them on next time there's an earthquake 4.8 or
in New
above.
York, well, probably, I mean, we've had two in 13 years.
Yeah.
That's a big one could be coming.
Yeah.
But so anyway, let's get into the show we're talking about this week. It's
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be it's kind of a drag because neither of us really liked it that much. It's a three-body
No.
problem. It was show run and written or co-written by the guys from Game of Thrones,
Wasn't it just?
and it features a couple of the actors from that show as well. In maybe my least favorite roles in the series, although
Who's it? Oh yeah. So Sam Tarley.
John Bradley, I think is his name, and
Sure, whatever.
it's funny because I was years ago, around the time of the last earthquake, I was out at a friend's birthday party at that place Walter Food in Williamsburg, and who else was having his birthday that night? John Bradley.
Really?
That actor was there with all his friends.
It's him and then the guy who plays Sir Davos
Yeah.
in Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Liam
And
Cunningham.
it's an amazing testament to the power of like real popular television shows
Prestige
that
TV.
like
Yeah, it's like
that get
impossible.
ingrained into the zeitgeist. It's like the whole time he's just Sam Tarley and Davos. The whole time. Like I can't.
Yeah, like you could not
Right.
they could not transcend those roles at
Right.
all.
I would say my review of the production and the effort of, in the much anticipated comeback of the now reviled showrunners in Game of Thrones, that boy, they really they lost their fastball forever, huh? Like watching this show, it's like they took more notes from like a pacing and vibe perspective from the seasons of Game of Thrones that everybody detests with their lives. And I'm left wondering, even more confused as to how they created those first seasons of Game of Thrones.
Well, I think
Because
I think the first seasons of Game of Thrones have the strong fantasy novel backbone of George R. R.
well,
Martin.
sure, but this has a backbone of a fantastic. I mean, like, and again, well, not again, but just to provide context, I read the Three Body Problem, the
The
first
first novel,
book in the trilogy, and
and the author is
I mean,
Lee Shishin. I don't know how to pronounce the last name,
yeah, me
unfortunately,
neither.
but
But
it's
but it is an incredible novel. I mean, it really is a fantastic piece of work. And so, a couple things. I think it should be somewhat similar, although this has been considered uh, incredibly difficult to adapt the
yeah.
trilogy as a whole. Um, and there is actually a previous version of it that was done in China
In China, that's Chinese
that is
language.
much better and much slower in the
Yeah.
way it develops. But just to briefly touch on the problem that I have with the show, and that I'm not sure I'm willing to revise my opinion that I don't love it, but I read the Three Body Problem, and then I started to read the second one, Dark Forest,
Yeah.
and I read like 80 pages, and I was like, I don't know if I even understand what the fuck is going on, because like I mean I have no conception anything to do with theater. I was theoretical physics. Like I was grinding through the first one, and it is markedly more accessible, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but so then when I see the show that I have been waiting for, because I'm like, I do fucking love Game of Thrones and I love Three Body Problem, the first book. The whole time I was watching it, and I should have just done a quick look, but I'm always scared to look online about shows just to like give away things, even though I guess in my head I also shouldn't have had spoilers. Anyways, I'm going down, a totally self-created rabbit hole here, but um, I just thought that they were adapting the first book.
Right.
And I was like, holy shit, have they taken liberties? This is so fucking stupid. Um, and then I found out just before recording this that in fact they take the nonlinear trilogy and they start to package it all together. Now there still are a lot of changes and a lot of amalgamations, and
And I
we
think
won't get it.
some uh, gender and race swapping in some cases. Like
Yeah,
I
and
think
like
they
some
introduced
characters are multiple characters
right.
or they borrow from different characters, or they just represent, like the Thomas Wade, who's played by Sir Davos. He kind of represents, I think, all of the governmental power
They've
figures
just
just into
consolidated
one
everyone into
very
one
powerful,
sort of
right?
CIA type guy.
Right. And, essentially, and before we get into what happens, I think while I guess I understand that more, that this was the attempt that they were doing, it still feels like they're just shoving so much down your throat over 8 episodes.
Yeah.
And the beauty of the book, the first one, like lies in the sort of like slow nature of what is happening and the amount of consideration and conflict between the groups that arise, um, and all of that just feels so ham-handed
Yeah.
in this series. So
So
why don't you start with how it begins, which is true to the way the
to the
novel,
novel.
the
Yeah,
trilogy is itself.
I've read the beginning of the novel. It starts during the Cultural Revolution, right? And we see
Yeah.
a struggle session where a physicist in China is up on a dais and is being excoriated for teaching relativistic physics and Einsteinian.
Why don't you just briefly talk about struggle sessions and sort of what was going on?
Well, so this is the Cultural Revolution, and it's, during the sort of Mao's attempt to consolidate power in a new way, basically like to purge China of these like Cultural Revolution is like a disaster, right? It's like millions of people were killed. It's fitting that this was happening in the '60s at the same time as struggle sessions were also happening in like hippie encampments. I don't know if you ever watched, you've watched those Adam Curtis documentaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one, I forget which one it is, Century of the Self. All of them are interesting. They're all pretty good. They're all a little surfacey, I would say, as a critique. But there's one really good one where there's a bunch of hippies out in the desert sitting in a geodesic dome, living in a commune. And they're all just like tearing each other apart, like all day and all night. And that this is a kind of like high caricature of like what happens when like leftists get like ultimate power, right? Is
Right.
that you can no longer have the sort of traditional hierarchical forms of power. There's no boss. So then the people that become powerful are the ones who are best in this kind of like recriminatory, like where you accuse everyone else of being, insufficiently
It's like a
competent.
purity test.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, this is the kind of thing that people on the right like to point to about the left as like why the left is bad, and
Sure.
they're right just to a certain extent. Like the left can get overly caught up in this sort of purity testing nonsense, but in China it was taken to an entirely different level. So what we see is this physicist who's the father of one of our main characters, Yi, Dr. Yi, who herself is a physicist, and he's like refusing to recant his faith in Western science. Essentially, he's like, I'm interested in the truth. Calling something. I mean, this sort of thing did happen. Like there were like scientific fields that were labeled as like Western and therefore illegitimate, despite the fact that you know like the Chinese were like making nuclear weapons and like it's like obviously on some level they accepted like the general framework of like Western physics, right?
Yeah.
I think China today looks back on this time as being bad, like which is why a book like this can get made, like
Sure.
or like a show like this could be portrayed. And I was reading about the reception of the show in China, and this is like one of the aspects of it that they really praised, like that the Chinese audiences were like, yeah, they got that part right. Hated the rest, but at least like this section. And I don't know, what do you think this is all about? Like, why does the story start with this moment? I mean, on the one hand, it robs Dr. Ye, who becomes not the protagonist, but one of the sort of central peripheral characters. I think it causes her to lose her faith in like humanity, right?
That's right. That's right.
Like,
While at the same time showing, in this case, other humans trying to prevent the proliferation of scientific knowledge and then perhaps scientific technological advancements, and she's being shown that that's being done as well by humans to each other, right? And so when we see what the goals of the Santi in the case of this of the show, their goal to prevent
human
humans from
scientific advancement.
from them making advancements is just basically like a similar
Something that humans were
situation.
already doing to themselves, essentially.
That's right, which explains, because what happens is that she is the one that makes contact with this alien civilization, and because of her destroyed faith in humanity, that of what she has been witness to and what she is living through, it is portrayed as the probably main motivation for answering, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, but answering an entity that is telling her not to answer.
Right, like we
Right.
will. If you answer, we will come and destroy you.
Right.
And she's like, "Here I am." Right.
Right. Right. We need to shake things up. It's pretty shitty here.
So
Right.
there are parallel timelines in the show. We
Hmm.
have this sort of following the doctor, the Chinese doctor from the 60s through the 70s into the 80s. And then we have another timeline that's sort of set in the present day, centering on a bunch of younger scientists who are students of who we later learn is this doctor, the Chinese doctor's daughter, right?
Yeah.
Vera Ye. And the show kind of opens very oddly, where we see this scientist is in a lab. This is after in the present day, and they're doing an experiment, and they're frustrated. Their funding's getting cut or whatever, and then just inexplicably, this woman just walks and just like commits suicide. She like leaps off
Yeah.
into like a reactor or something. It's very dramatic and very inexplicable. And then we meet Benedict Wong, who's some kind of detective who's like tracking all. Apparently, there's been an epidemic of these scientists
That's right.
ending their lives, and this guy's like on the case, investigating. So this
He might be the best part of the show, actually.
well, he's a great actor. I mean,
Yeah, he is.
everyone loves him. I love him. I mean, I feel like all I ever say about actors on this show is they're great, they're so good. But you know what?
There's a lot of bad performances in this one. But
Yeah. Well, I like to be positive. I'm pretty negative about a lot of things, particularly Da Vinci. But just a sideline. There's this Ben Franklin show's coming up on Apple TV. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yeah, we'll just cover it anyway.
We may have to just do a very special episode. Michael Douglas as Ben Franklin.
Cannot wait.
Have you seen the trailer?
No, I've heard that it's happening.
It is a nightmare, and I can't wait. But anyway, back to Three Body Problem. So should we just track like what happens in the 60s and then jump to the? So basically, this woman's imprisoned and sent off to a labor camp for a time. The book she gets, one of her fellow prisoners has a copy of Silent Spring, which he gives to her. Interesting, a text that we'll definitely be talking about in a future episode. That's sort of, about the way that humans are essentially destroying the natural world through their greed and through their desire for alleged technological progress. But this book is like Einsteinian physics verboten, right?
Yeah.
So she's caught with that, sent to like a worse place. Eventually, she's kind of assigned for life to work at this this observation point, this satellite, radio
Red
telescope.
Coast.
What's that?
Red Coast.
Yeah, Red Coast. It's called. Along the way, she meets the young girl student who killed her father on the stage at the beginning, and she's like lost an arm and is also now in an internment camp herself.
She's like, I've had it rough too.
Tables have really turned for her.
Yeah.
And this is the revolution will eat its children, right? I mean, it's a classic trope. And it's at this place, Red Coast, that she makes contact with these aliens, right?
Yeah.
And while she's working there, she also meets this idealistic American who's trying to save a species of finch or something, right?
Right.
Which is a reference to Mao's war on finches. Did you know about this?
No.
Yeah, that Mao was like, the finches are eating X amount of extra crops per year. Therefore, people in China, you should kill all the finches. So people went out and like killed all the finches. Guess what happened? Went perfectly, and they had more crops than ever. No, it turns out like the finches were eating all of the bugs. So instead of there being the bugs would just eat, like the whole countryside was over. It's like a classic example of like misguided top-down like interventionism in an ecosystem for essentially like petty and stupid dictatorial, there's examples of this abound. But I caught a slight reference to that and the fact that this guy is, he's the son of an oil mogul, right? His dad's like the most powerful.
Right. It's like, if I can just save one species, it'll be worth it. I'll stick it out my whole life just to do that.
Which is, very idealistic. His name is Mike Evans, I think, right? Not to be confused with the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
No, God forbid.
But they have a kind of sympathy. They both seem to see something about the inherent evil in humanity and are choosing nature against humanity. So when she gets this message from the Santee, she's like, great, come here, we're waiting for you, right? And then it's years later at a conference, she meets this guy Mike Evans again. She's gotten away. The Cultural Revolution is over. She's achieved. She has a regular teaching position. Turns out the Santee have been trying to contact her ever since, and he set up this kind of like naval space message receiving station, and he started to have a dialogue with them. Over time, it seems like they form a kind of cult of the Santee, where they refer to the Santee as our Lord. Pretty creepy.
Right.
And that sort of sets the stage for the present day, where this woman's daughter is also a successful scientist, very influential, and she inexplicably kills herself. And her students gather at her funeral, and we learn that the thing she was using before she killed herself was this VR headset. What do you think? What do you make of this VR? I found this to be very confounding.
Well, I actually want to ask you. I want to ask you a quick question before we talk about the game.
Yeah.
If you received a message
From
like the one, yes, that said exactly this, which is like, do not respond to this, or we will destroy you. Right.
I think
you've got a few options, right? You can either respond or not, or pass the buck.
Yeah.
Tell somebody else. What do you think you would do? Like you, Stu?
Yeah, I've gotten very good in the last 10 years or so at ignoring all social media messages and just kind of like not engaging. I have that urge to reply to someone on a thread of Twitter about Trump said blah, 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 actually
Right.
Obama was the real Nazi. And I've just gotten so deeply like trained to be like, I'll start to type and I'll be like, what can be gained by this? Nothing. Stop. Whereas I used to,
I think there was no way that I would. There's no way that I would respond to this.
I'm not engaging. Yeah. I mean, if they really need to talk to us so badly, surely I can't be the only one they've reached out to.
Yeah, and I think that's and it's sort of the same in the book. The same question came up to me when I was reading it, but definitely the way that the show frames it and how they've built her character. I just can't quite figure out. I just don't really believe that even if you were like, I don't think humans are that great for
even
each
if you
other,
were that black-pilled,
that you would then respond to this on your own and like see how the chips fall.
Yeah.
I don't know. That just seems it makes the whole thing a little hard for me to digest, I think. But I think that it would be easier if I had if she had a better motivation, I think, or if they were to at least like be mysterious about what would happen. Like, we're not going to tell you whether this is going to be great or not. That's up to you to decide whether to engage with us or not. Then I could understand that there's a bit of a risk analysis, but you're being told, look, if it's real, so either it's not real. That's what, the first thing you would go through is like, is it not real?
Right.
Right. And in which case, it's the same way that someone pretends they're the IRS on the phone with you. You're like, I'm not going to bother with this. Or it's real, in which case they have the ability to transmit this, and this is the message they're giving. So you're fucking right. I'm going to listen to it right away and do exactly what the hell they say, starting right now. But anyways, when it comes to back to the VR headset.
So before we get into that, like, there's four main characters, right? Of the younger, there's Jin, who's an orphan who's living in the UK, and she is kind of the main character. She's like the protagonist. She has three friends. One is Augie, who's Mexican, British, and is has studied with them. Is like a nanofiber company that's gonna change
that's
the world.
that's the main character of the first book. And he's the one who also accesses the three-body problem, and then is also sort of like the to the organizations.
Okay, so that all these other characters are kind of coming in from later books, maybe, or amalgamations of other.
Right. Like, he's the one who deals with the countdown that she deals with, where it's like,
oh, okay, where you see the numbers in front of your face. If you don't stop your nanofiber project, we're gonna make you kill yourself, essentially.
Right.
Then we have Rooney.
Sam Tarley.
Sally Rooney. No.
Jack
Andy,
Rooney.
What?
It's Jack.
Jack, yeah. What's not Wayne? Okay. Um,
Now that we've gone through the three
he's
Roonies.
so unmemorable that I'm just like pulled into
Yeah.
other George.
Other
No, that's
Roonies.
George Clooney. Sorry. Anyway, he's terrible. He's sold out. He's a millionaire for doing something. There's a big
Yeah.
there's
Well,
a big
he sells snacks. He sells crisps.
there's like a cigar aficionado cover in his house with him on,
Hmm.
that's just like what am I I'm watching this, I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? Like
Yeah.
like how do we get here? And then the last character is Will, who is in love with Jin but has never told her, and is a teacher, teaches at like a secondary school,
Yeah.
and has was also a great physicist but quit because he wasn't as good as the others. And then he's discovered that he has terminal cancer. He's gonna
Yeah.
die.
And he's, I think, the most compelling actor
He's
in
the
the show
best
for
actor
me.
by a landslide, and
Yeah.
is the most sympathetic character
Yeah.
because he's doomed, but he also just seems like a nice person,
Right.
and he has the opportunity to sort of like shove his love for Jin in her face, and
Right.
then like thinks better of it and avoids, doesn't do the cringe thing of like, I'm
Yeah.
dying,
But this is one of the problems I have with the show is that like you have this nucleus of characters who the lines they draw are just so clear and ham-handed and
Yeah,
heavy. And
it's
it's
very,
like Augie is like, I got into applied sciences, and the other ones are like, we're theoretical. Applied can be bad, and it's like, well, and then it's like,
it's like, well,
I got out of
theoretical made the A bomb or whatever. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
and then it's like Jack Rooney's like, I make money. How about that? Making money is good. I no longer, and then the one guy's like, Saul Durant, who I'm sure we'll talk
oh
about at the
yeah,
end.
Saul. I forgot about Saul.
Saul Durant is this genius, breathtaking genius who's down on his luck because he hasn't made a serious contribution to physics before the age of 30. So, oh man, I'm so jaded about everything. I don't care. I'm just gonna fuck everybody and do
Yeah, he's
drugs.
just
And
he's just
then
like a sex fiend hedonist.
right, and it's just like, man, like this is like
It's just like
the
central casting. Like,
yeah, that's right. There's no like subtlety in any of these characters because one of the reasons probably is that they're just hammering this huge plot
yeah,
over the course of 8 hours that just needs so much more time to make any sense or have any right. Like one of the problems with the whole show is that like it doesn't ever feel like anything's really at stake
yeah.
to me because everything is just being moved through. So quickly. Anyways, sorry to.
No, no, that's fine. So Jin and eventually Jack start to play this game that's on
Yeah.
this utterly revolutionary console
Right.
headset VR game where fully fully immersive. Everything feels like reality. And they're on a series of worlds trying to stop some kind of apocalypse. And what we learn is that what's causing this apocalypse is this so-called famous three-body problem in physics, which is that,
Yeah. Why don't you just quickly break that
well,
down?
there's no generalized formula that can sort of predict the movement of an object that's like rotating in the circuit of these three bodies, right? Like,
Yeah.
whereas with like planetary orbits where there's like a moon going around a planet, like these are like very stable, like Kepler
Sure.
and Newton and people were thinking about this hundreds of years ago. But it's like one of those great kind of unsolved puzzles in mathematics and physics.
Hmm.
And we come to learn that like this is the situation that the Santi are in with regard to their planet. Their planet
Right.
is in like a triple star system, I believe, right?
Yeah, and
And
they have stable eras and chaotic eras.
right, and the
Right.
stable eras are when they're safe distance for a stable amount of time from one of the
Right.
stars. But occasionally,
Hmm.
because these things are all moving, their planet gets pulled either into a too close orbit, in which case it gets too hot, or it gets in too far away, in which case it gets too cold. And as a result of this, they've had to come up with these ways of like sustaining their progress during what could be like
Yeah.
decades or even centuries
They
of like,
dehydrate and rehydrate.
right. That's how it's represented in the game. And we
Yeah.
assume that something like this goes on in their real world, but we don't really, at
Mhm.
least from the
Yeah,
first
we don't
season of
know.
the show, we don't know anything specific about what we don't know anything about them. We don't know what they look like. We just see them through this sort of AI avatar. Um, and the game part is fine, but it's so ugly and everything looks so bad. And
And it's so quick. I mean, it's like now you've learned this, level one, level two. Now you've learned this, level
yeah,
three. Here's all the information you're going to need.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, it goes over a couple episodes, but they by the end of the third episode, they've beaten the game and been invited to meet the sort of representative of the Santi.
yeah.
And I guess the point of the game is to try and recruit scientists who'll be sympathetic to their project, right?
Hmm.
But something about it just felt like, what? like
Yeah.
why would you do this way? Like something about it's just like the gamification of the problem. Like why not just be like, hey, we have this problem. Like, do you have any ideas? Like instead of like making them jump through these hoops of right. I don't know. Something about
Yeah.
it left me very unsatisfied. Jin is sympathetic to the people. This little girl avatar you meet, she always wants to save her. Jack is not. So once they're invited to this meeting, Jin is down. She's going to go along with it. Jack, however,
Hmm.
has better things to do. So is murdered.
He has to sell potato crisps.
yeah,
He's got way better. He's got way better things to do than be involved in like the greatest enigma in the history of mankind.
yeah,
You know.
and is
Let me know
murdered.
how it goes. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, yeah. Gets home is
Just so
immediately
ridiculous.
just slaughtered by this
Yeah,
seemingly superpowered woman who can.
sure.
She's
Tatiana?
yeah, she's augmented in some ways by the Santi. We have the understanding.
Mhm.
Then there are all these scenes where we cut to Mike Evans talking to the aliens.
Unbearable television.
It's just
I mean,
so
some of the
bad.
worst
He's
television
reading
you will ever see. It's so long. They go for so long.
he's
Why?
reading Little Red Riding Hood to this alien.
Yes.
And the
Right.
alien's like, wait, humans can lie? It's like, okay, hold
Oh
on.
my God.
How
It's so
long have they
painful.
been interacting? Like,
Yes, makes no sense.
is this the first
They
time?
see everything. They know everything. They see everything. They're in every room that you'll ever be in.
But they cannot lie.
Well,
Or
and they cannot process that we lie yet. This is
after
new
observing
information.
everything on the planet for
Right.
untold decades, possibly, like, makes very little sense. Also, they're at Alpha Centauri, I think, which is very convenient because it's like the by far closest star system to the Earth. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
so that worked out. Also, like, if they were going to go anywhere, that's where they would go because it's like the only place to go. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like, so it's like they've sent this message out, and it's like we reply. It's like our reply shouldn't matter. They should just come.
No, that's right.
Like
Why even say anything?
Well, I guess it's going to take them 400. I guess they say it's going to take them 400 years to get to Earth, and their fear is that if they don't disrupt Earth, they can
Yeah.
essentially like humans will be too advanced for them to defeat by the
That's
time
right.
they arrive.
That's right.
Davos and sort of
Thomas Wade is the name of
Thomas
the
Wade
character.
and Benedict Wong, like they do a raid. Like Jin goes to her meeting at the Santi cult, and then there's
Yeah.
just immediately a raid where it's
Yep.
like she's just gotten in, and they're like, "You're going to be our eyes and ears," and like they just
Oh my God.
immediately storm it with like troopers and like killing people, and like
Yeah.
they arrest.
It's so off the rails.
It
I
just
don't
feels
understand.
very haphazard. There's no
Right.
development.
And so much of the strength of the book, which we won't get into a lot because we're going to
Cover it
do an
later.
episode
Yeah.
on book. But like is the consideration and the mapping out and the time and the sort of caution or versus, recklessness. This is just like this isn't what the book feels like.
No,
You know?
I believe it. It's really
Well, I mean, Thomas Wade, it just becomes a complete. I mean, it's interesting that he just sort of serves as the symbol of all of the intergovernmental military power structure, like debate, discourse that populates the book, and is just one guy who's just like, we're gonna have to figure out what to do 400 years from now. So that's another like piece of it that we sort of should talk about for people who haven't seen it, which is that The idea is that the aliens are coming in 400 years, right? That
Right.
they're letting us know when, but that's how long it's going to take. This is not, we talked about this before the show, but it's like the reverse arrival. So instead of hovering without intent, but visible to humans, they they also don't really reveal their intent with the initial message, other than just don't answer this. But they we do learn that it's going to be a hot minute before the aliens are here.
Right.
But Thomas Wade, which I guess maybe some people would react with, instead of like, I don't know, we'll talk about it in a second, what our reactions would be. But his is to immediately become the savior of the entire human species. And
to the point where he's going to freeze himself.
Yes,
and
yes.
Like,
So
which, by the way, this
somehow
is all,
depends. He decides it all depends on his involvement to like.
This is all very
back.
Isaac Asimov, by the way. I don't know if you ever read Foundation.
No.
Don't. It's not worth reading. He's a terrible writer. Some of the ideas are good. There's a guy in that called Harry Seldon who develops this science called psychometry, psychohistory rather, where he can like read the future, like certain events are going to happen, and he like clones himself and freezes like, and so that he can be like along for the ride over this like
Right.
thousand. This is like a very old sci-fi trope of the one guy who's going to like freeze and unfreeze to continue managing this. What about the CGI ape when they freeze the ape? It's like,
but at first he's just like trying to figure out.
Well, at first he just massacres.
No, I mean before that, when it's like he's trying to figure
with
out
the
what's
spy.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like all of a sudden he's the most powerful person in the world.
Right, and
or
he's
something like that.
He's like British Secret Service, but like has access to every other country. And
Yeah, it's sheer nonsense.
It doesn't make
because
any sense.
they portray it like it's happening now. You see like newscasts with Joe Biden on it and stuff.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like, wait, well, this is not how any of this functions at all.
Yeah.
It's like it makes no sense. It's not even like a dastardly superstructure or anything. It's just a dude who's just like, I'm gonna take control.
Right. I don't think we ever really learn what his actual title and position is. Like,
no.
He's just like all powerful secret agent. He can like have people massacred and arrested at will,
Right.
and detained indefinitely without trial.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Yi is captured and she's just in a cell for like basically.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they felt the necessity to tether it to our current reality in terms of like the newscasts. Like Jake Tapper's in the show.
Yeah, always a bit of a dice roll putting in Tapper.
I mean, yeah, for sure. But like you could definitely make it a near future where there's a whole different, a bit of a different
where like Bill O'Reilly
structure.
is no longer like around.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right. Dana Bash is not working.
Yeah. So what we learn eventually is that this guy Mike Evans has been, sort of spearheading this "Bring the Santi Here" movement. So they use the microfiber, the nanofiber, to horrifically mutilate him and all of his the children that are on his boat.
I mean, that scene is just heinous to watch.
And
it's tough.
And
it's a tough watch.
It feels like, why did you do this? Oh, because they want to get the drive that has all their contact with
That's
the
right.
Santi.
Yeah.
And they get it. Mission accomplished. But at what cost? Well, they killed 280 people or whatever it is.
Right.
By like stringing up a net of like these incredibly strong diamond.
Right. The only way to get this information.
The only way
is
we could have done it, just
murder them in a totally unique, historically unprecedented manner that is so evil.
Very weird, right? Like when they were showing that,
this is where Augie, of course, learns how dangerous it is to get into applied sciences.
Whoops.
Right? That's not the application I intended. And what do we then find out? The application she intended was to give everyone in the world clean water. Wow,
right.
what do you know?
We see
it's the exact opposite of what she intended. Thank you very much. That's so cool.
But in the demo, when they're like testing it, what are they doing? They're like cutting a diamond into pieces.
Right.
With
Right.
Anyway, it's really just terrible, like pointless. So they learn the Santi are coming. They're gonna build a plan. Their big plan is to send a brain at the Santi, but in order to do that, they need someone who's on the verge of death.
Yeah, their big plan is to send a brain.
That basically, right? Like they're gonna freeze.
And like again, I think this happens later in the books, but I can't imagine it's handled in this totally ridiculous way over the course of 70 minutes of television or whatever.
Jin is helping the mission at this point, and
she's all in because you have to fight back, and she supports Thomas Wade, Sir Davos, because he is fighting back too. Don't you see? He's fighting back, and I want to fight back. Augie, you should fight back. Augie, I don't think I want to fight back. Like that's the dialogue. The dialogue is so laborious.
It's staggeringly bad. Yeah. She says, "The Santi declared war on us. That's what the eye in the sky wants. The Santi are real, and I have to do something." It's just like, oh my God. Like, this is so much worse than even the dialogue that we made fun of in Dune a couple weeks ago. Like, this is
way worse.
This makes Frank Herbert look like Shakespeare. This is dreadful. This makes Frank Herbert look like Malcolm X. Okay, so anyway. Conveniently, Jin has a friend who's about to die of cancer, but who knows...
And a hell of an idea.
And who's very gifted in sciences and could talk to the Santi once they reanimate his frozen brain, which is going to take 150 years to reach them.
But then, like, the thing that...
set of nuclear explosions go off.
And again, I think the guy, it's Will, Will. Who's dying. He's got a pretty coherent storyline, but again, it's like so over the top. Like, he is just so in love with Jin
that he's just gonna do this for her.
He loved Jin, and now Jin is with a very gorgeous military man, and
who's the guy who did the horrible thread murder of the boat.
Right, he's the butcher.
It's all very convenient that they all just like know each other.
It's a very tight circle. And then one has to wonder if it's all preordained by the Santi themselves. Who knows? But Will is just so in love with Jin.
Well, he spends all the money he got from Jack, who left his fortune to him.
Buy Jin a star that she can look at. I mean, Jesus
which is
Christ,
like this money-raising scheme. For the war
he's on like
Santi.
An emo trip of like the highest proportion.
And we see his like impoverished British relatives be like, "Hey, let us have."
Yeah, you got a quid. You got a quid.
Just like,
and he's like, "I'm sorry, I spent 19 of my $20 million on a star for a girl who doesn't like me." Right?
Well, she obviously does like him, though.
Well, then of course she realizes, of course I always loved Will. Now I don't love the gorgeous fucking military guy. It was always Will. It was always Will. And you know what? I'm actually in love with his brain.
She rushes to see him, but he's already been dissected and put into this capsule.
That's right. But she cares enough about him that, like, there's this weird scene where she wants to put corn and chili pepper into the capsule.
Because it's his favorite food or whatever.
Oh, he loves a bit of spice. He loves a bit of spice.
Let's wrap this up. One last thing I want to talk about. Oh, yeah, go on.
Sure. So Will is willing to do the brain journey. He's going to go on a brain journey. Which guarantees
he'll never see her again.
Right. And he's going to get there because Jin has developed this idea of a sail that essentially creates through nuclear detonations that are perfectly timed and orchestrated all the way into, towards the Santis.
Santi, yeah.
Yeah. Is that as long as they time it perfectly and nothing goes wrong, what could possibly go wrong? They'll just keep having these nuclear detonations that make him go exponentially faster until eventually he's traveling at the speed of light.
No, not the speed of light, like a quarter or a tiny fraction of the speed of light.
Sure,
like,
enough to make it get to the Santi
before they get here.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And so this doesn't work, right?
What a shock. So his brain's just off into space.
All that happened. So the first few detonations work. There's a lot of nodding going on, a lot of smiling. There's a lot of, wow, she did it. Wow, they did it. Wow, it's working. Which,
detonation 5 or whatever.
Right, I know that we're all watching thinking maybe they're going to make it then because they've set it up where the first few are working. But then the thing that goes wrong is just like a screw comes loose.
Yeah.
one screw on the fucking machine,
well,
and it's all over.
it's the butterfly effect, right? You know,
Right.
the
Yeah.
waterfall begins with the first drop.
Right. So it fails, and it fails, and they're down on their luck, you know?
Yeah.
And Saul, who's, long been the nihilist of the group, who's done, made very, very pithy statements like, "We are mere bugs." He's such a genius. He's such a breathtaking genius that he wants to know that actually, from a certain perspective, we're actually just bugs, and they might look at us as bugs. All is lost. And the gumshoe cop guy, who's now following him around because he has become a wall facer.
Right. He's being he's been targeted to be killed by the Santi through their agents. Right. And so he goes into protective custody, and he's going to be a wall facer because the Santi have sent these. This is the thing I was going to talk about. They've sent this like proton-sized computer that's it's a world mind that can expand to literally cover the entire sky if it wants to, but it's also as small as a proton. This is amazing. Right. And it's disrupting technology all over the planet. It's causing physics. This is how they're just disrupting human progress. They're going to prevent us from being advanced enough to defeat them when they arrive. So we need to come up with a plan to defeat these Santi. But the Santi can hear and intercept any communication on the planet. So these people are elected. A couple of them are like generals or scientists. And
there's three.
Saul is like one of them.
Yeah.
And he's a wall facer, and they're called that because they don't speak. They only come up with their plans in their heads. This is also very Asimov. Like this kind of
this thing. This is also a great example, and I do have faith in the rest of the novels because the first one was so good. But this is a great illustration of a bunch of the different problems of adapting this, which is so much of it is interiority.
Yeah.
Right. And you can see the creation of the wall facer belongs in a novel.
Yeah.
And so actually getting to
where you can actually go into the head of someone.
Right. And instead, I can't even imagine what they're going to do with it. But the idea is that Saul is now one of the three most important people in the history of the world, which of course ties into the beginning of the show when he was down on his luck as an underachiever.
So it's like Saul, Leonardo da Vinci, Ben Franklin. Is that the order?
That's right, the Holy Trinity. And so after the mission fails, the first main mission, which is to hurl Will's brain head first, as
now
it were.
They need a new plan, and
now they need a new plan, and they don't know what to do and how. They're so far away,
but
and what possibly could happen.
There's like a go get 'em team kind of speech from Liam Cunningham.
So the next step is still, despite the failure of this, they are still planning to have the wall facers try to figure out something, some defense or some.
And
plan
there's 400 years. I think what makes this different from like Arrival or any of the other kind of apocalyptic films or books or TV shows that we've looked at so far is that it's like a long-term apocalypse, right? The apocalypse is like decades.
Again, great for a trilogy of books.
Yeah, but as far as like dramatics go,
it's tough.
Because are the future series just going to be taking place hundreds of years in the future where all these characters are dead, or are they going to freeze them, or you know what I mean? There's I
don't know, because so then let's just quickly talk about the way it ends before we talk about the 400-year question. So like what happens is the cops like, come on, you guys did a great job. That ship thing with the brain in it, man, that went so fast, right? To try to like pick them up. Think how fast it went, right? And of course, Saul's like, we're bugs. We're mere bugs. Which
is what the Santi have told us. They had every screen on Earth just flashed the message, "You are bugs.
You are bugs. You are bugs."
Like, if that happened to me, I'd be like, okay, cool. Like,
I'd be like,
can I get my back to my video game or whatever?
Right. Whereas the cop has
people are genuinely shaken by this. But now
the cop has been assigned to Saul for life to protect one of the wall facers.
Right.
And so he's essentially Saul's bodyguard. And he needs to pick these two up, right? They're sitting at a pool, some shitty motel for some reason.
In the tropics somewhere, right?
Well, in Florida, right? Because of the, right? So he takes them to, I guess, the Everglades, probably, right? Yeah. And just gives this speech of like, we always hate bugs, don't we? We've been killing bugs for as long as we've been around, right? I kill bugs every day, but guess what? the bugs are still here. And it's like, well, yeah, but I mean, in a way different context. I mean, there's, but it's not quite this simple, but yeah. And then of course in classic, like end of, final seasons Game of Thrones, it's like the heaviest, metaphor you can possibly find. Bugs, bugs, we are bugs, 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 we are bugs. And then it ends with a bunch of bugs, right? Look at all these bugs. And there's like this shot of
It's
just
like,
so many bugs.
like we have so much hope because we're like the bugs who are everywhere.
Right. But like,
wow.
unlike the previous, the first seasons of Game of Thrones, where they set up a bunch of chess pieces and you're excited about what is to come, you are left with basically no fucking idea
Yeah.
what season 2 is going to look
If
like.
there even will there even be a
Yeah.
season 2?
Will there be a season 2? Who gives a fuck? No, because again, like it doesn't even feel like, again, they're taking this thing that is so cool.
Yeah.
The idea of an alien civilization reaching out, but also not coming for 400 years. And
I think it's great. And some of the tech stuff is cool, like the nanofibers.
and right, some of the stuff is really cool, but they put it all together and they rush through it. And so, none of it matters. It doesn't feel like it matters to anything. Right.
No.
Like you can see in if you're extrapolating season 1 of Three Body Problem to the way one might think of the first 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Right. Then like you're talking about like the moment when they unleash fury on the ship with the nanofibers and they kill all these people in this glorious way.
That's like the Red Wedding or something.
It's very much like the Red Wedding, but you're fucking
but you're there
in
in
the middle
episode
of the first season.
It's episode 4 or something.
Right. And it's like it's funny to think that this, and obviously there's limitations and I don't know how many episodes they have and what they decided, but like it's amazing that these characters, these showrunners went through what I can only imagine was like the hell of
Backlash.
being totally just destroyed for the way they ended the show. And surely haven't been able to reflect of like, yeah, people really loved like when Stannis showed up, after all that time to win that battle, or when Tywin shows up for the Lannisters at the last
after 8 episodes of no time.
Oh, you know why that happened? It's like because we took so much time with this, and
he shows up, he meets expectations,
and there's something.
They're like, no, let's go
fascinating
above the wall and then send a raven that gets all the way back down. When previously it took 3 months to get from the wall. To
right. And they only took the lessons from like season 7 of Game of Thrones or whatever. Incredible.
We gotta catch a white.
Right, and. It again, I think it's another conversation we can touch on with other examples, but like it shows the limits of which Game of Thrones really did, and I'm sure we will do Game of Thrones at some point. The sort of limits of commodification and the medium of television, right? About like how much time you have, how much money you have, all of that has such a profound impact on the way that we tell stories in a capitalist culture, right? And so the idea of an alien civilization making itself known and then coming in 400 years could be a hell of a 20-season television show, maybe, right? But it's not like it always has to be that long. I mean, we just talked about the first season of Leftovers last week, which is excels in taking its time.
Yeah.
But to end this, because I don't think there is much more to say.
No.
We should like, my question is, I asked you earlier about what you would do if you received the message. What would you do if you were just in that same apartment after a couple of days after the removed from the earthquake, and it turns out that the earthquake was actually
the Santi
contact, and one very lucky person has found out, and that has spread quickly over social media, who have moved quickly from talking about the New York 4.8 Richter scale earthquake into discussion of an alien civilization coming in 400 years. What do you think that looks like here? And what do you think you would do?
Nothing. I think there's a lot of gloating from the UFO community.
Oh, yeah. They're on one.
That would be pretty insufferable. I know some people in
There'd also be so much. There'd be years of, is this real or is this fake?
Oh, yeah.
There'd be 400 years of it,
I think the time, 400 years, I mean, that's, 1600s. Like, think of how long that is. It's like the 30 Years' War had started.
Do you think? Do you think it would would it further plummet the birth rate?
Probably. The jig is up, right?
Now the morally responsible thing clearly is to not hang around.
Yeah, right? I mean, might it actually contribute to reversing global warming and stuff like that? Maybe.
Yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
know, but it's also like there is the argument to stick around because like there is that, and I think the show does a bad job of doing it, but there is that kernel of possible human salvation through any interaction with an outside
yeah,
civilization.
yeah,
Whether or not their goal is to destroy you doesn't mean you have to be destroyed. And so, could rallying around this common cause, and then somehow defeating the enemy that wants to destroy you lead to some
utopia.
sort of
Yeah, golden
utopia,
age.
right?
Yeah.
Right, some golden age.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
hopefully.
the idea of like things are going to get a lot better once we deal with these aliens, right?
Isn't that how it always is, though? Like,
I just feel like it would. I kind of feel the way I would feel about a 400-year alien civilization coming, the way I feel like if I learned of an afterlife,
yeah,
I feel like it would just be a huge weight off of my shoulders. I feel like it would actually get rid of all of my petty anxieties. It really would make me stop worrying so much because there is this thing that is
light
going
at
to
the end of
come.
the tunnel.
Right, right. And I feel like that I think a lot of people would be a lot more
You're like,
carefree,
damn,
carefree.
I'm down on my luck, but oh wait, the aliens only
Right, right, that's
379
right.
years away. Like, all right, I think that's good for today. What are we talking about next time, Michael?
Ex Machina
The
is the
film.
next
Yeah,
the film Ex Machina.
by Alex Garland, good filmmaker. I have not yet seen it, so I look forward to discussing that with you. We'll be dealing with another trendy topic, namely AI.
Bum, bum, bum.
Doo-doo-doo. But in any case, until next week, this has been The End of the World with Michael and Stu.
I'm Michael.
And I'm Stu, and we will see you next time. Just a brief reminder, if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at The End of the World WMS. And tell your friends about the show if you like it. If you think they might like it, we're always looking to expand our audience. Awesome. See you guys next week.